breaking news today.
Please subscribe and then check notification box to get all breaking news alerts.
Turn on my post. McCain's war hero legacy demolished overnight after alarming scandals are exposed. This will kill him. For years, John McCain has used his Vietnam POW story and veteran status to rise to political prominence, for decades portraying himself as a Vietnam War hero. His prestige as an American war hero afforded him the opportunity to become a United States Senator, where this facade has allowed him to seamlessly bury scandals that would ruin any normal person's career. But unfortunately for McCain, 12 nasty skeletons from his past are now emerging from the closet, sure to solidify his position as the crookedest politician in American history, just in time before he dies, and nauseating tributes are made to his heroic life as a public servant. 1. John McCain killed 134 of his fellow sailors aboard the USS Forest Hill aircraft carrier in 1967. John McCain graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1958, where he became commissioned as second lieutenant naval aviator. His Navy career was disastrous from beginning, where he crashed 2 Navy jets and was involved with other nearly fatal mishaps shortly after graduation. But because his father and grandfather were both 4-star admirals, McCain got preferential treatment, and was able to continue to serve, despite being a horrible pilot. But tragically, McCain's cocky actions as a young pilot while aboard the USS Forest Hill aircraft carrier on July 31, 1967 would go on to kill 134 sailors, in a horrifying incident where his involvement was scrubbed from the Navy's official records. According to eyewitnesses that day, whose accounts were predictably buried by the Navy due to John McCain's familial ties to 2 4-star admirals, McCain decided to be a show-off, by doing a wet start of his jet. This reckless maneuver makes fuel buildup in the engine before the plane is started. The result is a flame erupting from the tail of the plane, that's accompanied by a startling amount of noise. After McCain started his engine in this manner, the electrical surge of this maneuver subsequently caused the accidental launching of a powerful Zuni rocket across the carrier's deck, that hit 2 other parked planes that were packing 1,000-pound highly explosive bombs. The fire then caused a chain reaction of bombs to detonate, causing explosions that went several decks below. The ensuing explosions nearly sank the 82,000-ton U.S. aircraft carrier, with the fire fatally consuming 134 sailors aboard the Forest Hill. 2. John McCain is funded by Muslim terrorists. McCain was exposed earlier this year of being the recipient of millions of dirty Saudi and Iranian money. This money was dumped into his McCain Institute. Via the Daily Caller, the McCain Institute, created in 2012 with an $8.7 million donation of funds remaining from McCain's unsuccessful 2008 presidential campaign, refused Monday to disclose the amounts it received from its biggest donors who gave $100,000 or more. The Royal Embassy of Saudi Arabia, for instance, is identified as giving $100,000 or more on the Institute's website. In reality, the Saudis gave $1 million. 3. John McCain is a George Soros puppet and is directly funded by the evil billionaire globalist. An investigation by the Daily Caller revealed that McCain is the large recipient of large donations by evil billionaire George Soros, who is one of the most dangerous anti-American liberals on the face of the planet. McCain's legacy foundation is stuffed with Soros cash, which explains McCain's incessant efforts to remove Trump from office in recent months, and also McCain's mission to get Muslim terrorists into power, both key goals that Soros has had for quite some time. It was also recently discovered that McCain has been taking massive amounts of money from Iranian terrorists as well. 4. McCain led massive government cover-up of the Vietnam POWs he was in captivity with that President Nixon left behind. John McCain was sent on a bombing mission over Hanoi in October of 1967 when he was shot down and captured by the North Vietnamese, where he's go on to be a prisoner of war until 1973. What most people don't know is the massive government scandal that McCain helped hide, as he'd go on for decades to tirelessly work to bury stunning information about American prisoners over in Vietnam who, unlike him, didn't return home. Using his position as a senator, McCain would be behind the scenes quietly pushing and sponsoring federal laws that would keep the most damning information about our pals buried through classified documents. John Songbird McCain is welcomed back as a hero by President Nixon. The secrets that John McCain has sought to hide about Vietnam pals are massive. Despite sworn testimony by 2 defense secretaries of the men left behind in Vietnam, McCain continued to push the massive lie that there were no survivors, much to the horror of POW families who were frantic to know the truth about what happened to their loved ones. Enormous amounts of government documents indicate that hundreds of prisoners held in Vietnam were not returned when President Nixon signed the peace treaty in January of 1973. Only 591 in Hanoi were released, among them, Navy combat pilot John S. McCain. After the war, President Nixon promised the Vietnamese a $3.25 billion in post-war reconstruction aid without any political conditions. But there was a catch to this promise, where Nixon had included that Congress would have to approve these funds, approval that never happened. Furious that the American government had double-crossed them, Hanoi decided to keep the remaining hundreds of American prisoners, because their ransom money, post-war provisions, never came. CIA whistleblowers said that the government wanted to keep these missing men a secret, because as more years passed, it became more and more difficult for the government to admit that it knew about the prisoners that were left behind. Years later, CIA officials admitted that their intel indicated that the remaining POWs were eventually executed by the Vietnamese, as they were no longer useful bargaining chips. 5. After being released as a POW, McCain discovered his wife had been disfigured in a car accident and dumped her for a younger, prettier woman. As John McCain was held in captivity, his wife Carol was involved in a terrible car crash that left her disfigured and wheelchair-bound, where she put on a considerable amount of weight. But John McCain would soon discard his first wife like a piece of trash, disgusted with how she now looked. The Daily Mail reported. When McCain returned to America in 1973 to a fanfare of publicity and a handshake from Richard Nixon, he discovered his wife had been disfigured in a terrible car crash 3 years earlier. Her car had skidded on icy roads into a telegraph pole on Christmas Eve, 1969. Her pelvis and one arm were shattered by the impact and she suffered massive internal injuries. Today, she stands at just 5 ft 4 in and still walks awkwardly, with a pronounced limp. Her body is held together by screws and metal plates and, at 70, her face is worn by wrinkles that speak of decades